It began with a rumble that shook me out of sleep like an earthquake clawing at the bones of the mountain. I stumbled out onto the porch in my boots and flannel shirt, heart pounding, the cold mountain air biting at my skin. My cabin clung to the slope like it had for 40 years, and the stone wall my father built with his bare hands braced the earth beneath it. That wall had stood through blizzards, storms, even floods, holding the land firm like a shield against gravity. But what I saw that morning turned my stomach to ice. The wall was gone. The stones were scattered like broken teeth at the foot of the slope, mud already seeping through the gap. A yellow backhoe crouched in the dawn light, its engine coughing smoke, and next to it stood Karen, the HOA president from the valley below, arms folded, chin high, and her figure puffed up like she had conquered a kingdom. She wasn't even subtle about it. She barked orders at the workers, telling them to clear the illegal barrier and return the slope to natural form. My land, my wall, decades of sweat and heritage, reduced to rubble by her arrogance. I shouted, my voice echoing against the ridge, but she only smirked, yelling back that she was enforcing environmental compliance, and that my wall was a violation of federal conservation code. She waved a clipboard like it was scripture, claiming that her HOA had the authority to restore any land within sight of their development. My fists shook at my sides. My property was never in her HOA. My deed was older than the HOA itself. But Karen didn't care about facts, she only cared about control. The neighbors, drawn by the roar of machinery, gathered along the road. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered nervously, afraid to speak up. Karen pointed at me, her voice rising like a prosecutor at trial. He built this monstrosity illegally. He's been destabilizing the mountain for years. When this slope fails, the whole valley will be at risk, and it's his fault. The words cracked something inside me. She had destroyed the wall and now was already shifting blame, writing her lies before the dust even settled. I stormed back inside, grabbed the leather folder that held my deed, my father's old permits, even photographs of him laying those very stones in the 70s. When I marched back out, I held the evidence high, shouting that the wall was not only legal but grandfathered under county law. Karen scoffed, calling it fabricated and irrelevant. She laughed at the photos, mocking the way my father looked in his work clothes. Every word fueled the fire in my chest. But then came the twist. My cousin Lena, a civil engineer with the state, happened to be visiting that weekend. Drawn by the noise, she stepped forward from the crowd, her hard hat tucked under her arm, her badge clipped to her jacket. The murmurs rose as she examined the broken wall, the exposed soil, the backhoe tracks grinding into the slope. She turned slowly to Karen, her eyes like steel. Do you realize what you've done? That wall wasn't illegal. It was structural. By tearing it down, you've destabilized the entire hillside. Karen faltered for the first time, her mouth twitching as she tried to recover. She shouted that Lena was biased, that engineers didn't understand aesthetic harmony, that the wall was ugly and disrupting property values. Lena cut her off with the precision of a hammer strike. Ugly doesn't kill people. Collapsing slopes do. And as if the mountain itself wanted to prove her right, the ground gave a low groan. A crack spidered down the slope where the wall had stood, and a sheet of earth sloughed off, crashing into the road below. The crowd screamed and backed away. Karen's face drained of color. The slope, once held steady by my father's craftsmanship, was now bleeding dirt and stone. It wasn't just property damage, Anna Maria, it was danger. I stepped toward her, my voice shaking not from fear but from fury. You tore down what kept this mountain standing. You risked all of us, and now you dare to blame me. She tried to rally, shouting that I had built the wall wrong, that it would have collapsed eventually, but her words were drowned by the chaos of sliding soil and the gasps of neighbors filming every second. Lena grabbed the nearest officer from the crowd and barked, "Get county emergency response up here now. This is a public hazard." Karen lunged toward me, waving her clipboard like a weapon, screaming that she would sue me for damages, that my illegal wall had endangered the entire community. But the evidence in my hand, the engineer at my side, and the mountain itself collapsing beneath her arrogance told the real story. That was when Daniels, the sheriff who lived 2 ridges over, arrived with his patrol truck, lights flashing against the pine trees. He listened to Lena, looked at the rubble, then at Karen's trembling form. His verdict was swift. Karen, you're under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. The neighbors gasped, phones raised higher, their fear turning into vindicated cheers. Karen shrieked, tried to bolt, but Daniels caught her by the arm and cuffed her on the spot. She screamed all the way down the slope, spitting accusations, calling everyone liars. But nobody believed her anymore. The wall of fear she had built with years of fines and threats crumbled just like the stones she had destroyed. And as the patrol truck carried her away, I stood by the rubble of my father's wall, the mountain scarred but still mine, and felt something I hadn't in years. Justice. The county emergency crews arrived within the hour, their floodlights blazing against the mountainside as engineers scrambled to stabilize what Karen's recklessness had unleashed. Excavators dug drainage trenches, surveyors measured the cracks, and orange barricades sealed off the road below. Neighbors huddled in clusters, whispering about how close disaster had come, their eyes drifting back to me not with suspicion anymore but with sympathy. I stood near the rubble, my boots sinking into the loosened soil, the weight of memory pressing heavy. My father's wall wasn't just stone and mortar, it was legacy. A piece of him that had held this mountain steady long after he was gone. Seeing it reduced to rubble felt like losing him all over again. But as the officers collected statements and Lena explained the structural damage to the county team, I knew the truth had been laid bare. Karen had destroyed more than a wall, she had destroyed her own empire of intimidation. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Local headlines screamed, HOA president arrested after wall demolition causes slope collapse. Footage of her screaming in cuffs, her clipboard flapping uselessly in her hand, replayed on every channel. Reporters called it a textbook case of abuse of authority. Social media exploded with memes of Karen standing beside the backhoe, tagged with captions like, "Gravity doesn't care about your HOA." But what stunned me most was how the tide turned among the neighbors. People who had once stayed silent out of fear now came knocking on my door, bringing coffee, food, even offers to help rebuild. One elderly couple admitted that Karen had fined them thousands for having rocks out of alignment in their garden. A single mom confessed that Karen had threatened her with foreclosure if she didn't repaint her shutters. Each story spilled out like a wound being cleaned, and for the first time in years, people felt free to speak. Karen's husband, gray and worn, showed up at my porch one evening, hat in his hands, his voice trembling. "I tried to stop her," he said quietly. "I begged her not to tear it down. She wouldn't listen. I just want you to know I'm sorry." His eyes watered, not just from shame but from relief, as if Karen's arrest had freed him too. I clasped his hand and told him the truth. He wasn't to blame for her choices. The neighbors saw his honesty and welcomed him back into the fold, no longer as Karen's shadow but as his own man. The trial months later was a reckoning. The courtroom filled with residents ready to testify, their voices steady as they recounted years of harassment, forged fines, and bogus environmental violations. Lena testified as an expert witness, explaining in clear, cutting language how Karen's actions had directly destabilized the slope. The county brought photos of the collapse, maps of the danger zone, and repair invoices totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Karen, stripped of her sun hat and bravado, sat hunched at the defense table. She tried to argue that she had been protecting the community, and that I was a selfish landowner endangering everyone. But her words fell flat under the mountain of evidence. The jury saw through her, and when the verdict came guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in applause that the judge didn't bother silencing. She was sentenced to fines, restitution, and a suspended jail term with probation. More humiliating still, she was ordered to perform community service assigned to shovel snow and haul debris in the very valley where she had once strutted with false authority. Every time people drove by and saw her in the neon vest, they shook their heads and remembered the day the slope collapsed. Karen had gone from self-proclaimed queen of the HOA to a cautionary tale, her reign undone by her own arrogance. As for me, the county partnered with Lena to design a new retaining system. This time it wasn't just stonite was reinforced, engineered, and funded partly through a settlement Karen's HOA was forced to pay. Dozens of neighbors volunteered their time, hauling rock, mixing cement, planting new greenery to anchor the soil. Where Karen had tried to destroy, we rebuilt stronger, together. One crisp autumn evening, we held a gathering at the foot of the new wall. Kids played tag across the gravel, someone strummed a guitar, and tables of food stretched along the road. At sunset, Lena unveiled a wooden plaque bolted into the stone. Strength through truth. The crowd clapped, some with tears in their eyes, because it wasn't just about a wall anymore. It was about a community freed from fear. I stood with them, my chest swelling with pride, not in victory over Karen, but in what we had gained. We had taken back our voices, our trust, our dignity. The slope stood firm again, and so did we. And Karen? She moved away within the year, her house sold at a loss, her name now infamous across the county. But the internet never forgets videos of her shrieking as the slope crumbled still circulate, a permanent reminder of what happens when arrogance tries to rewrite the truth of the earth itself. Now, when I walk the ridge at dusk, I look at that wall glowing in the last light of day and think of my father. His work had held the mountain for decades, but the real foundation wasn't stone. It was resolve. Resolve to build, to protect, to stand firm even when others try to tear it down. So I ask you, was Karen ever defending the environment? Or was she just tearing down what she didn't control? Was I wrong to fight back? Or was it justice to hold her accountable for the ruin she caused? Share your thoughts, because silence lets tyrants bulldoze the truth, but standing together rebuilds what arrogance tries to destroy.